I just first want to say how honored I am to be part of this wonderful event and have a chance to express my profound admiration of Blanche. Many thanks to Anne-Marie and the Daniel School for inviting me. And I also want to thank Anne-Marie and Eric Mumford for their help with some images, so my debts are big. I don't know Blanche well, but I've been very fortunate to have a few encounters, most by mail or email. So this little talk will be quite personal and episodic. I first met Blanche, let's see, why is it not progressing? I first met Blanche at a symposium on Charlotte Perriand that I organized at Columbia University in 1998. And I think it was Val Woods, the widow of Shadrach Woods, who suggested that I invite Blanche and another woman, Maria Fenio McLeod, to the event. Both knew Charlotte Perriand from their time working together on the Unité d'Habitation in Marseille, which we've heard about, while they were in Le Corbusier's atelier in the late 1940s. The suggestion may have come from Charlotte herself via Roger Augean, who also worked on the Unité with Edith Schreiber, who would soon become his wife. And much to my amazement and delight, Blanche came from Canada, all the way from Canada to New York for the day-long event. She was so gracious and supportive. And of course, I was extremely grateful for her support. When the book I edited, there's the day-long event that she very graciously sat through. And when I finally got this book finished in 2003, I sent Blanche a copy. And just like her, and I've heard other stories along the same lines, I received a lovely handwritten note thanking me for the book. And clearly, she had actually read parts of it from the nature of the note. Our next encounter wasn't until a decade later. I was working on an essay on architectural education for a book edited by Joan Achman, Architecture School. She doesn't feature in her own essay. She does prominently in Anne-Marie Adams. I was trying to figure out who were the first women to be full-time teachers and deans in North America, as well as to learn more about the history of the University of Toronto. When I interviewed George Baird about the school, he spoke admiringly about all that Blanche had done for the architecture program and the school more generally, and how she had put it back together again. Just a sec, my voice is gone. Apparently, there had been lots of exhilarating experimentation in the late 60s and early 70s that had seriously begun to falter by the time of her arrival. And she helped establish relations with both the profession and the university that were at a new low. Blanche's answers to my queries about her own academic positions amused me. First saying that it wasn't that Anne-Marie's territory, and of course it was. And then somehow, after answering carefully all my queries, almost always shifting exchange to her dear friend, Stasia Nowicki, which she would continue to do in almost all our intermittent emails. What came out again and again in these exchanges was her admiration and deep friendship with Sasha, who was hired at the same time as Blanche at the University of Pennsylvania. In fact, it was almost as if she turned every question about her own role as an educator into an occasion to praise Sasha, who she described as extraordinary, surviving World War II and hiding as a child, and then after the tragic early death of her husband, caring for a young boy and baby, all while becoming one of the leading educators at Penn. She mentioned to me more than once that Dean Holmes Perkins referred to Sasha as, quote, the best teacher of first year there ever was. And that numerous students would attest to her superiority as a teacher. She also mentioned to me, talked to me about her incredible graphic work, calling it very beautiful. And here is a note I got after sending her some images of Sasha at an event at Penn. She was about 10 years older than Blanche, and apparently their friendship was just a very deep and close one. But what also came out in these exchanges was her respect and deep appreciation of other women educators at the time. In this email, she describes being sent by George Holmes Perkins, the dean at Penn, to meet Catherine Bauer, with whom she had a long, interesting conversation about housing policy, and whom she liked so much that she wanted her husband, Sandy, later to meet her. She refers to Bauer's professional acumen and calls her, quote, a great person. And in another tantalizing email, Blanche describes Jacqueline Tyrwhitt, or Jackie, as she calls her, and says that as an architectural critic, she was as perspicacious, I always mispronounce it, as any, and then declares that she was a great teacher. I found out later, talking to EPEC, that they were in fact quite good friends, and that Jackie, or Jacqueline Tyrwhitt, was a kind of mentor to Blanche, introducing her to CM. After hearing her remarks, it made total sense to me that she would later go on to curate in 1986 the first exhibition of women architects in Canada, and in general to have an incredible role supporting women architects. The next series of emails with her concerned a website that I'd been co-editing with Victoria Rosner, Pioneering Women of American Architecture. This had to do with women architects who were educated and began careers before the women's liberation movement of the 60s and 70s. It was never quite clear to me whether the sponsor, the Beverly Willis Architectural Foundation, meant American to only be US or not. But I decided Blanche had to be in it. And I took an executive decision, as they say. And of course, the person to write that profile was Anne-Marie, and she decided to collaborate with Tanya Southcote, whom you heard of earlier in the little video clip. But after their first draft, we realized there was still more details to be had, especially about Blanche's time working with Bob Geddes on the Philadelphia chapter of CM and her time in Le Corbusier's atelier. Geddes, who was the dean at Princeton when I was a student, had once mentioned to me how much he valued and enjoyed collaborating with Blanche, and I urged Anne-Marie and Tanya to contact him, and hence the recorded phone call, which has been part of today's celebration. And here's an image of the project they did with Sasha Nowicki and George Quayles, study of Levittown, Pennsylvania, about 2 decades, I might add, before Venturi and Scott Brown's Signs of Life exhibition, which examined things like Levittown. I'm dying to find images of the 56 board, so if anyone does, please tell me. And also Bob Geddes doesn't know where they are. And much to my delight, Blanche wrote the following email about her time in 1948 in Le Corbusier's atelier. Unlike most of the young people building models or designing apartment interiors with Charlotte Perriand, she was given, as you've heard already, the task of working on the roof terrace. This email from her gives a rare glimpse of her own role and how much Le Corbusier trusted her in the creation of what, in my view, is one of the great spaces of 20th century architecture. Here you see her comment about the ventilators, where apparently Le Corbusier encouraged her not to be quite such a purist. Originally, she had articulated all 3 fans. He did appreciate that she splayed the ventilator a feature that would remain in the final scheme. And here are her comments about the tiles on the nursery structure. Apparently, he spread out a pile of Provençal tiles on her desk and said, figure it out. And here, her role in the children's play area and the explanation for the high parapet to eliminate the immediate landscape and emphasize the Alpes Maritimes in the distance. And I just want to show you the end result of these communications was the marvelous profile of Blanche that Anne-Marie and Tanya wrote, and they quote part of this email. And I would encourage all of you to read it for a quick summary of many of Blanche's accomplishments. I'd like to conclude, here's another image of that profile. I'd like to conclude with one more detail, a kind of footnote, if you will. A couple of weeks ago, I happened to mention to the architectural historian, Robin Middleton, that I was going to be speaking at this event. Robin, who was technical editor of AD in the late 1960s, mentioned to me another accomplishment of Blanche, and he was very eager that I report it. Something we hadn't included on the website entry, and one that I haven't seen in all the articles paying homage to her this year. I might have missed something. And that is her seminal role in AD's special issue of Expo 1967. Robin immediately volunteered what a superb job Blanche did, assembling all the materials and saying that she was essentially responsible for this iconic issue of AD. Anyone who knows Robin knows that he's not one to praise readily, in fact, quite the contrary. And it seems to me from this little anecdote that we still have lots to discover about this remarkable woman. And I feel so fortunate that I've had a chance for these intermittent but very special encounters with her. Thank you.